Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. So, I am Dr. Julian Montano. I will be your moderator for this evening. So, welcome to all again. To start with, I'd like to again welcome and thank everyone who is connected with us for this webinar. We have a number of schools, companies, we have different uh, places, organizations. I want to acknowledge our partner organization, the Philippine Guidance and Counseling Association. And then we also have three youth organizations. I'd like to acknowledge them. First of all, the First Help, and then Silakbo PH, and then the Kahindlani Group. Thank you again for joining us and supporting this effort. So we have a lot of people who have joined us. We are from Metro Manila, Cugigaraw, Naga, Iloilo, Cebu, General Santos. We are all over. We are in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And we are connected via Zoom and the Facebook Live. So we've embraced the whole country. So again, so happy to be with you and to share with you this webinar. Okay, so for those who do not know, our official name is In Touch Community Services Incorporated. And we were established in 1980. Can we move a slide forward? There you are, right? So that is 1980, and we are, yes, celebrating our 40th founding anniversary. In Touch is a volunteer-driven organization dedicated to promoting mental health and providing psychological support. So today's webinar is in line with the observance of the Suicide Prevention Month and is entitled hashtag Live Life, Why You Matter in Suicide Prevention. We have four speakers for this webinar, each sharing their own expertise. So let me introduce them. Slide, please. We have Jelly Verata. She is a registered guidance and counselor. She's a registered psychologist. And all those other initials are just shows that she is an expert of the solution focused brief therapy. Jelly has shared her expertise maybe on this, maybe by now thousands of counselors and non-counselors. And then next we have Josie Bana Glorioso. She is a PhD graduate of clinical psychology. She's also a registered psychologist, and then also expert of solution focused. But she also, among her other expertise, she is a family therapist, and she has many experience on psychological issues that are experienced in the corporate life, in the corporate scene. And then we have Agnes Nano, a certified executive coach and SF practitioner, also an expert of solution focus, who uses such an approach to help suicidal people find their own little ways of moving on. She has trained and continuously provide support to hundreds of mental health volunteers. And lastly, but not least, we have Ivana Mabunay. She is a registered psychologist. Ivana is one of our young generation counselors. She brings in new energy and works with children and the youth. She specializes in development and social skills and maintenance of emotional regulation. So again, my friends, hashtag live life, why you matter in suicide prevention, wants to tell us that each one of us individually and in a community, can help save more lives. So let's now just look at some the content of our webinar. Just an outline, just a short outline. So we will start with mental health, and continue mental well-being, just to give a background of from where also the suicide issue is coming from in this big mental health issue. And then why talk about suicide, very important on that part. And we'll talk about different aspects of that are related to the issue of suicide. And then why you matter as support, so as to provide you also material support, ways, frameworks to be able to support yourself and your loved ones. And then we want to leave you with many other resources that you can use for yourself and for your loved ones. So maybe we would have to go back to a few slides just to, I just want to give you some reminders. um, yeah, sorry, there you are. Right, so make sure to mute your microphones. Questions and concerns, you can send a private message to the host. If you are watching via Facebook Live, you may send your questions in the comment sections. Right, so our question, the QA will be placed at the end of our webinar. But as you have your questions, as they come to you, please feel free to write them on Zoom chat or the In Touch Facebook page. And then also, we want to give this support in case you'll be needing support anytime during the webinar. Maybe things might have triggered you or something. Please message Myrtle In Touch. We will then let you know also in the Zoom, maybe in the chat. You can also put it down there, and or in the In Touch Facebook page. All right. So thank you again. So now let us start, ladies and gentlemen. We will start now. I'd like to ask Jelly to start our webinar by giving us a foundational understanding of mental health in relation to the threat of suicide. Jelly, thank you.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much, Julian. Thank you very much, Dr. J, for that introduction. Okay. There we go. So why is it important for us to be talking about mental health in general, in relation especially to our very important topic today of suicide awareness and prevention? Um, it's important because this is part of our total body-mind well-being. We really place emphasis on taking care of our physical health. We have our regular mental checkups. We know there's a lot of information on what to do about nutrition, in terms of also exercise and everything that we need to do to keep our bodies healthy. And it's only in the recent years that more emphasis is being given to our mental and emotional health. So how do we define mental health well-being? Next slide, please, Stella. So according to the World Health Organization, WHO, the way that we can define mental health well-being, it's not just the absence of a mental illness, but mental health well-being is when an individual, each of us is able to utilize, is aware of, and is able to utilize our own talents and capabilities. We're able to use that in our daily lives. We are able to um, be productive, lead productive lives, whether we feel that our lives matter, whether at work and at school. And if I may add, also being able to have nurturing relationships, to maintain nurturing relationships. We can handle the stresses of normal everyday life. And an important part is to be able to feel we're making a contribution to our communities, yeah, and to society. And so what's happening right now and becomes more important these days with the prolonged quarantine and the presence of COVID in our environment, the stresses are increasing. And so it becomes really more important at this time, 6 months into the lockdown, for us to take a check on what our mental health well-being is. Especially, this is the starting point for us to see, are we at risk, or somebody we know, are they at risk for depression, and in severe depression that may lead to suicidal thinking. Next slide, please. This is important to begin talking about mental health because unfortunately there is still a stigma, meaning it's hard to talk about mental health. It makes many people uncomfortable. It's much easier when we want, let's say we call in sick at work. It's much easier to say that we have a stomach ache or we have a migraine. We rather than saying I need to take a mental health day off because I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling anxious. Because when there is shame in that, shame is there because it's something we don't understand. Yeah, the stigma is there because we don't understand what causes it. Yeah, how we become affected, and how we can treat this. And the way to break the shame or the disgrace is actually to start talking about it, to begin to seek support. Yes. So if we look at the past, there are times in the past history, human history, even in the past 50 years, where there's some medical conditions that that had a stigma. For example, in the 1960s, cancer, there was a lot of silence and hush hush before. When you get the diagnosis of cancer, it would mean a death sentence. Yeah, but we know nowadays with early intervention, early testing, with breast cancer, the outcomes are very different for many types of cancers. Yeah, there's so many treatments now available for people to recover and lead productive lives. In the 1980s, those of you who watched last year Bohemian Rhapsody with Freddie Mercury, he passed away because of AIDS. And at that time, 1984, if we imagine that time, Rock Hudson, another famous movie star, was diagnosed with AIDS and he passed away in 1 year. Because of all the advocacy done by people around HIV and AIDS, they were able to research the cause of transmission, which was through the blood. They were able to research to be able to create the medications that are necessary to maintain the lives of people. So that in 7 years, by 1991, when Magic Johnson, a famous basketball player, NBA basketball player, was diagnosed with HIV, he could already begin the new treatments. And even up to today, he survives and is thriving. So that's why it's so important to break the stigma and shame of mental illness and um, mental health conditions, so that more people can get help early on, and then more effective treatments can be found to help these people. Next slide, please. So, yeah, two things. Anybody with a mental health condition have two things in common. First of all, nobody asks for it. Of course, we don't want to be having a mental health condition, and nobody deserves it. Yeah, no matter what we did or did not do. So early intervention, seeking help, being able to recognize the signs from ourselves when, oh yeah, maybe I'm getting depressed. This long quarantine, I will admit, even 2 months ago for myself, even counselors, we were feeling anxious and some anxiety and some depression. So when we can see the early signs, we can take steps to either take care of ourselves or to seek support, from people we know or from professionals. So that's the good news. Next slide, please. So what is exactly a mental illness? What is it and what is it not? Yeah, what it is, it's a medical condition. Yeah, it's a medical condition, and we want hopefully when we break the stigma, we'll be able to talk about it as commonly as people talk about diabetes. You know, it's not your fault that you have diabetes. It's a biological condition. And we know that that is a factor, as well as there are environmental factors. It is quite common. In fact, 20% of the adult population will have at one point in their lives experience either a depression or anxiety. And I wonder if we took a poll in this room right now with everybody tuned into the webinar, um, how many people have been affected, their lives have been affected by knowing somebody who has a mental health condition, a family member with depression, a best friend who has anxiety, yeah, a work colleague who, because of substance abuse, has mood swings, or, people around us, yeah, in school, somebody that we know, or even the celebrities. Many celebrities are now coming out, yeah, in order to help break the stigma and then to help people to get support. Because we know it is treatable. That is the good news. Mental health conditions are treatable. There is psychotherapy, counseling, there are support groups. There is also medications that are now developed to help anxiety and depression, as well as psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia. Yeah, so we know it is treatable, and people with mental health conditions can lead productive and meaningful lives because of the available treatments. You might be familiar with a few of them. For instance, the writer of Harry Potter, who wrote J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, has been open about her depression. And for bipolar disorder, which is manic depressive disorder, one of the foremost clinical psychologist experts, Dr. K. Redfield Jameson, has written a book called The Unquiet Mind about her own personal experience being diagnosed with bipolar. So, and Prince Harry of England has also come out about the effect of grief, the complicated grief that he experienced when his mother died. So more and more people are coming out in order to break the stigma. So we also want to be aware about what it is not. So we can give thanks to Joey De Leon, for saying hindi to gawa-gawa. It's not something we just make up. It's not something we can easily snap out of. Yeah, it's not caused by a personal weakness because of the biological factors of depression. It's not caused by bad parenting or bad behavior or punishment from God or possession by an evil spirit. And it's also not caused by poverty. Although financial stressors can aggravate depression and anxiety, we also know many people in the lower economic status who are highly emotional resilient, that they're able to find ways to keep going with their lives despite the financial stressors. Next slide, please. So just to find out what a depression is. Depression is a negative set of beliefs about ourselves. It's also a negative way of looking at life and also the perception towards the future. So it affects the way we think, feel, and act. And some of the signs to look out for in terms of depression is persistent sadness that goes on and on, low mood, it's a feeling of helplessness, hopelessness. There's a loss of enjoyment in the things that we used to enjoy doing before, activities we liked doing before. There's disturbances in sleep and eating, as well as feeling tired and difficulty concentrating. Next slide, please. What is anxiety, on the other hand? The flip side of depression. It's when we're worried, yeah, because there's things that are uncertain. We don't know what's going on. And now with the COVID around and the quarantine and the changes of MACQ, ECQ, and all of that, many things are uncertain. So no wonder there are more callers to our crisis line talking about anxiety. It's when the worry of a bad thing happening is actually worse than the bad thing itself. Yes, it's good to be vigilant with COVID and to take the proper precautions, but we don't want our anxiety to run away from us and disturb our normal life functioning. Next slide, please. So some of the symptoms for anxiety can be migraine, headaches, rapid heartbeat. Um, it could feel like a panic attack, rapid breathing, as well as having stomach problems. So these are some of the symptoms of anxiety. Next slide, please. What we want to look here at is how, when we're able to handle stress well, we seek safety and connection in our social supports. It's only when we fall down, going down the spiral, going down the ladder, when there's a uncertain danger or threat that happens, we go into automatic defense mechanisms, protective mechanisms, either fight or flight. So with fighting, the anger, we can become more irritable. Those of us who have more the tendency to flee or leave the situation, there could be anxiety because maybe we don't know where it's safe to go now with the COVID around. And then as the threat gets worse, other people, the most primitive defense mechanism is to freeze. Animals play dead until the threat passes over. So that's like a depression where we are not able to move, we become immobilized. And when the depression really becomes worse, then that's when the thoughts of suicide start to come. Or we want everything to be over, we want the threat to be over, we want to go to sleep and just wake up when everything's all right again. So that's part of the suicide thinking. Next slide, please. So how do we know when to seek help? So this is what we call the continuum of mental health well-being. Next slide, please. It's important to notice here the blue-green zones, the orange zone, and then the red zone. When we're in the blue-green zone, we're able to handle the stresses of normal everyday life, our normal self-care, the usual self-care strategies around like taking a break, taking rest during the weekend, eating right, doing some exercise, getting social supports from people we trust, are able to keep us within the blue-green zone. It's only when we find our symptoms getting worse that we're becoming less capable of handling normal everyday life and the thoughts about the problem increases. That's when we begin to seek the social support of a counselor, or a psychologist. Where if there are too many arguments in the family, then the family is a problem. Maybe we need to look outside the family in order to get support. And when the symptoms even become worse, that for 2 weeks or more, a person is not able to function or take care of themselves, they get into the red zone. That's when we'll need to see whether we need a medical intervention like hospitalization or seeing a psychiatrist so that medications can be prescribed to somebody in the red zone. Next slide, please. So what are the symptoms that we need to look out for? Green zone is safe when everything is working normally. We're able, even if we're work at home now, even if we're locked down, we're able to maintain our daily routine, interactions with the family, and all of that, and still have hope and optimism in our life. We get into this yellow zone when there are more stressors. That could be pressures at work. That could be relationship. There's some arguments in the relationship or in the marriage or in the family, or even a grief, meaning somebody that we're close to dies. We are built to survive these types of stressors. So with the usual supports, seeking the help of people that we trust, and taking care of ourselves. Sometimes we might need to take a break, more rest and recovery time, some alone time. Other people turn to prayer, or walking maybe outside when we can, or taking a break. Those things are easily taken care of in the moving us from the yellow zone back to the green zone. And then when we're going to the orange zone, that's when the symptoms become more disrupting to daily life. there are more sleep disturbances with the anxiety maybe and the worries and the the depression. It's harder to force ourselves to get out of bed. Yeah, the intrusive thoughts about the problem, the persistent worries become more. And as the deeper it goes, there might even be thoughts of the suicide, like what we saw when we're going down the ladder, wanting the problem to be over. Maybe I just go to sleep, and things will be better without being very passive and not doing anything about it. Those times, if you notice yourself or somebody you know in that, it's a good idea to start to check. Maybe do I need to see a counselor? Yeah. Or do I need to call the crisis line? Because if we don't take care of it in the orange zone, and the functioning becomes worse to the point of 2 weeks or more, somebody cannot get out of bed or you know take care of themselves, even bring themselves to go to work or to do school. Sleep deprivation is actually a dangerous thing. More than a week, more than several days or a week of sleep deprivation can really affect our thinking processes. So if you notice anybody with like racing thoughts or paranoid thinking, yeah, these are really warning signs, because if we let them go unnoticed, yeah, or without helping them to get better, some suicide thoughts, some people might start to make plans. Yeah, and that really increases the risk of the risk of danger that somebody will actually take their life as the suicide thoughts become more persistent, that they start to make plans and they begin to lose hope that things will get better. Yeah, this is the time when we really want to seek intervention with a psychiatrist or hospitalization. And this is so important for us to become aware of, because we see here it is a slippery slope. And once we get here um, to the bottom, then interventions must be made. I'd like to turn over the floor to Dr. Josie Banaglorioso. She'll tell us more about how it's so important for us to be talking about suicide and to be more comfortable talking about this topic. Dr. Josie?
Okay,
Mhm.
I'm not able to start my video.
It's okay. You can start.
There you go.
We can hear you. There you are.
Okay.
Great.
Anticlimactic. Okay. Hello, good evening, no? Thank you, Jelly, for that spectrum, no? But before anything else, I just like to ask a question, okay? So we'll have a poll survey where I have here a statement. Can we move to the next slide, please? I want you to, there will be a survey that will be conducted, and then you just need to answer whether do you think this is a true or a false statement. So depression can always go away on its own. And then submit, no? Make sure you submit, you click the submit button so that we can tally the results. And Ella can give me a feedback, okay? On how many of you agree with this particular statement and how many don't. Do we have the numbers, Ella? Or, or the numbers are still, oh, okay. Wow, okay, you probably don't need this talk, no? Because a lot of you seem to agree that depression can always go away on its own. That's like 85% of the audience think, no? And only 15% does not. Okay, so actually, yes, can we move to that? Can you flash the rest? So, yes, that statement is false, no? So what is interesting about incidents of depression, it can be recurring, no? Maybe at the first few stands, okay, or experiences, you're able to cope with life. But then we all know that stressors come in waves. And if you are not, if your skills does not grow in terms of the in terms of dealing with these challenges, then chances are you might find yourself at a certain point having a depression and have difficulty dealing with it. No? So it can recur. So make sure that's precisely why we encourage you to go in and build your skills in terms of handling uh, your stressors. So yes, and suicide do not just happen. No? There's a progression. There's a story of vulnerability before it becomes an actual thought, an attempt, and then a final act. So thank you, Jelly, for discussing that spectrum, no? Because that's exactly the point that I was about to raise, okay? Because it does not happen right away, no? There's a progression. And interestingly, can we move to the next slide? You know what the statistics tell us? 2017, that 1 in 4 adults are affected by some form of mental disorder every year, and anxiety and depression tops the list. And in fact, 264 may be suffering from depression. Okay, so 264 million may be suffering from depression. So, so it means that okay, in the statistics in the workplace, it's 1 out of 5, but that's not too far from a 1 in 4, no? So meaning if you have 5 people or 4 people, one of them is most likely to experience some form of a mental health disorder or some form of anxiety or depression. And this is also prevalent at work. And what is interesting, they attribute it to harassment and bullying at work. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? So what does the picture look like in the local scenario, no? So if we are 100 million, that's the total population, just an estimate. So 3.3 million Filipinos are diagnosed, are clinically diagnosed with depression, and another 3 million are diagnosed with anxiety. And interesting, the data also says that they're estimating that another 100, not 100, 1 million people who's left undiagnosed, and another million who's left undiagnosed for depression, or the other one is for anxiety. So why is this so? So if you look back at the spectrum that Jelly was describing, some of them might be experiencing some form of mild or moderate depression, and they can cope pretty well, no? Before consulting perhaps a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So, but I think it does not stop there, no? After getting diagnosed, because what we want to prevent is the number below, no? The 2,500, okay, reported successful suicide that happened last 2012. And later on, you will see in the data that it increased around 2017 by around 3,200. So, and majority of them were males. Okay, that's like 80%. So if you look at the global statistics, can we move to the next slide? Okay, the WHO said, okay, that this is 2019, that there are around 800,000 people that die of suicide every year. It's higher than those people who pass on due to malaria or breast cancer or even homicide, no? So I think there's a serious global public health issue. That is 2019. So can you just imagine, okay, now that we have the pandemic, which a lot of experts are saying that this is also, the pandemic is also it brought out a mental health crisis. So I don't know how much these numbers are, no, at the moment. And interestingly, if we go to the next slide, so it's like every 40 seconds rather, someone dies by suicide. And majority of these individuals fall in the age of 15 to 29. So that's not a good picture, no? These are individuals who supposed to be a lot to have they have to have there's a lot of promise in their lives, futures, and perhaps relationships or marriage, and that they can look forward to. But they passed on, right? So 15 to 19, in fact, in 15 to 19 years old, it's like the suicide is the second leading cause of death. So it's contagious. And what is interesting also, for every individual who took his life, there may have been 20 more who's making an attempt. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is the picture, the latest picture. Actually, it's 2017, no? The mortality rate of suicide, which I mentioned earlier. So if we are 100 million, so there's like 3,200 people passed on because of suicide. And majority of them are males. So that's around 5,200, okay, of these individuals, okay, moved on. I mean, passed on because of suicide, and females around 2.3. No? So that is just the average. The 3.2 is the average. So there are more males, okay, committing suicide, for like 5 of them committing suicide for every 100,000. And then can we move to the next slide? So what does the picture look like now that there's pandemic? So I don't have the number of the incidence of suicide, but what I have are snapshots of, how people are stressed, or their mental health condition, they're distressed because of the given pandemic, plus the ECQ. So interestingly, in the US, okay, 45%, no, of adult Americans reported that they were experiencing negative impact on their mental health due to the stress of the COVID-19. So 35% of them, okay, also from the Chinese, okay, the population, 35% of them uh, said that they were also experiencing the negative impact of mental health. And in UK, 32% of them agree that the pandemic has affected their mental health. And interestingly, okay, there was a rise also of alcohol consumption. No? So that's there's a 20% increase of usage or utilization of alcohol between ages 15 to 49. So we do not want this particular number, okay, or this incidence, because the alcohol consumption, okay, if you are abusing alcohol or any other form of drugs, okay, this could also contribute significantly to someone's suicidality or depression. And interestingly, they have attributed it to school closures, okay, concerns for the family, and yes, of course, the loss of routine and the loss of social connection. Now, there's another data here, okay, that I'd like to mention, because I think, sometimes we think that, first responders, or, our mental health workers, or even the medical health workers that we have there, who's attending to those people who were victims of the COVID, they could also be having some form of mental health crisis. They're also as vulnerable. In fact, if you look back, there was last May, there was a Dr. Breen in the US who attempted to commit suicide. So how can that be? Somebody who's highly functioning, who has achieved a lot, became a victim of this particular incident. So in China, for instance, no, they mentioned that, 40, there's a number, okay, there's 65, is that, I can't, okay. There's a number that they're experiencing some form of depression. 50% mentioned that they were experiencing some form of depression. 45% mentioned that these are health workers. I'm talking about health workers experience some form of anxiety, and 34% experience some form of insomnia. Now, can we move to the next slide? This is a snapshot, of course, of what's happening and in the National Center for Mental Health. And according to Dr. Roland Cortez, who's the chief, he ascertained that yes, okay, there's a rise on depression because of this pandemic, plus the ECQ incidents. No, so they have a hotline, and interestingly, 10 months prior the COVID, okay, prior the ECQ, that was March 15, 2020. they were only averaging 13 to 15 calls. And surprisingly, during the COVID, it doubled, no? 30 to 35 number of calls. So if you they count and they count the number of monthly average calls, okay? So before it was only 400, now it turned out to be 953. That's the average monthly call. And 45 of these calls are suicide related. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? Yes. Okay. So I think one of the main question is what's the cause of suicide, no? Uh, I think that's a difficult question to handle, no? So it's like there's a narrative that goes on, and like what Jelly mentioned, the spectrum earlier. So uh, it doesn't in suicide doesn't happen right away, no? There's a story, there's a build-up of story or a build-up of vulnerability. Now, what I'll be talking here is who is the person who's likely to do it, no, or who's vulnerable. But let me just mention a warning, no. It doesn't mean that you might find yourself in one of these risk factors. You're most likely to commit suicide, no, or you're about to commit suicide. Uh, Again, these are long-term issues that continues to build. And then if what I think the reason why I wanted to emphasize this is because there is a need for us to be more proactive, especially if we know that we have the vulnerability. Can we move to the next slide, no? So I will be discussing each one of them. Okay, so let's start with the mental health conditions. So somebody who might be suffering with any of these mental health conditions, who were diagnosed or not diagnosed, but maybe suffering from a mild or severe depression or condition, no? So they are vulnerable because exactly if they have this condition and if we have multiple stressors like what we're having right now, and they're not ready or equipped to address these stressors, then chances are they could, they could fall short in terms of their sleep. They would probably miss out on their medications, and then once they missed out on their medication, that creates a ripple effect. So likewise, people who may have medical conditions like suffering from cancer, multiple sclerosis, or perhaps diabetes, serious form of diabetes. So I think there are times when it's difficult to embrace this particular conditions or accept them. So chances are they go through that kind of struggle, no? The depression incidents. So again, they can also be vulnerable. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, so these are the environmental factors. So what is interesting about environmental factors, what we have there is the bullying, no? So whether this is through social media or physical or emotional bullying or battering, I think that increases the vulnerability of the individual. Now, let me just also put social media. I think social media has its plus and minuses because we benefit, we engage, we connect, and we get information, but it can also be a source of stressor, no? So if you already have a risk factor like anxiety, depression, sensitivity, low self-confidence, I suggest you may want to get out of social media for the meantime because they can really be triggers, no? And another one, people who might have access to lethal means. Now, what is interesting about, okay, I notice I'm competing with some voices in the background. Can you just check and please unmute? Okay, please mute rather, no? Your, okay. Okay, thank you. Your Zoom, no? Okay, thank you. Now, I think the access to lethal means, and interestingly, uh, lethal means we initially think of a gun, but these are the ordinary pesticides or cleaning agents that we have that tops the list. So you may want to, be more careful with this with these things that you have that lies around, anywhere in your household. And another one is the epidemic of suicide, no? And I would say, I think this happens especially when Christmas is about to come in, or perhaps after Christmas and after Valentine's Day. I think we have a spike of calls, especially on suicide, no? Suicidality. Or hi bantay. Okay. Sige. And then also, I just like to mention and emphasize the stigma, no? Which Jelly mentioned earlier. Again, because when these conditions are stigmatized, and people believe that this is just an acting out, or you're possessed by evil spirits, or this is just an attitude problem, or just trying to get attention. So these kinds of belief system, actually, it's a myth, no? What I want to say that depression that results to suicide is a brain disease, no? That can result to suicide is a brain disease. Now, in fact, I'd also like to emphasize that, if there are availability of information and resources and access, this is also a protective factor. Another one is feeling isolated. So if there's lack of family support system or community support system for the families, this can also increase the risk. And likewise, having a quality support system or a community and a family support is also a protective factor. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, of course, the historical aspect, no? Now, I will cover a lot of things in the history of the individual that may contribute or perhaps make one vulnerable, no? Example, there's a history of previous suicide attempts or self-harming behavior. There's a history also of substance use or alcohol abuse, no? There's a history of physical or psychological abuse other than bullying, no? Or also a history of impulsivity and aggressive tendencies. Okay, and also a history of life events that could trigger the suicide act, no? So and mostly it's associated with loss, no? Loss of a partner, a relationship, loss of a job, financial loss, loss of a significant other, or perhaps also hearing, okay, knowing that some significant other committed suicide, no? Or perhaps maybe they may also be people not familiar or not related to this individual, can also increase, no, the suicidality, the attempt, no? Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, I just like to emphasize, again, these are risk factors, no, that endure over some period of time. I think what we want here, we want people to be more proactive about these risk factors. So educate, create awareness. So we want to prevent this from happening. Now, what I will be presenting next these are the imminent suicidal indicators. Okay, so these are the things to watch for, because in the succeeding presentation, this is what you want to avoid. Not rather, these are the behavior that you want to listen, not avoid, rather. Okay, but before that, let me do a poll. Okay, again, I have here suicide attempts or death happens without a warning. Do you agree with this, or do you don't agree with this? Okay, Ella. Sige. Do we have the numbers? Sige. Wow, okay. So yes, okay, a lot of individuals claim, no, that yeah, there are 66% in the group, no, says that it's false, no, that suicide attempts or deaths happened without a warning. Okay, can we flash the what's okay, can we flash? Okay, yes, it's false, no, but there is a third, no, of individuals listening right now that there are no warning signs. Actually, there are. It's just that we don't recognize it. Okay, so hopefully after this incident, okay, uh, after this awareness, so you may, become more aware, okay, and more educated, and in terms of what you need to look out, no? Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, okay. So interestingly, the suicide warning signs, okay, what do people say, no? What do people say, and how do they behave, and what is the prevalent, the mood, no? The prevalent mood that can occur, especially for people who may have, who's most likely to hurt themselves, no, or make an attempt. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes. Can you flash? Yes. Okay. So people, some would literally say that they want to kill themselves, perhaps jokingly, or perhaps, you know, they just breeze through it. Or others can simply articulate that they're feeling hopeless, or there's no reason to live, or, okay, they're being a burden to others, or they're feeling trapped, or the unbearable pain that they're currently experiencing, no? So usually I would hear the last three. So I think you may want to alert your ears or your mind, no, or your attention when you get to hear these things, no, when people talk. Now let's look at the behaviors. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, okay. So what I have here, okay, if somebody is increasingly consuming, okay, alcohol and drugs, then chances are you would see that they're oversleeping, or they're not sleeping at all, no? So if there is an effect on their basic behavior of nutrition, eating, okay, and sleep, uh, either they're overeating or undereating, or starving themselves, or oversleeping and not sleeping at all. So again, chances are the mental health condition could spiral downwards. And then, of course, this could occur withdrawing from activities and withdrawing from people. No? Why? Because the reason that they would say is they're too tired and too exhausted. So it's a combination of physical and emotional exhaustion. Now, can we move to the next slide? So this other set of symptoms is different rather, no? So I think you have somebody who becomes so impulsive and aggressive with no consideration for risk. No? They would try anything, right? But not looking at the risk involved. And also, they may be calling people to say goodbye or giving away their prized possession. So usually you can see this behavior occurring, especially after they have been, okay, gone through that depressive state. No, they have very low energy, they're exhausted, they have been withdrawn. Then all of a sudden they have this extra energy. So this is, you have to watch out, especially when they started doing this, because the person has already made a decision to end his life. So we do not want that occurring, no? So they need help. Okay, now let's look at the moods. Can we move to the next slide? So again, this is just a repetition. So you have depressive moods, anxious moods, okay? Loss of interest even with the things that they usually are interested in. And for men, okay, there are some statistics that for men, they would have emotional outbursts, or they readily get angry, no? Or okay, they could also be apathetic. They have no regard for hygiene or how they look like, no? And uh, there's also a combination of having so much self-doubt, or guilt, or there's so much shame that they're experiencing, no? And of course, okay, this is what you don't want, no? All of a sudden there's a shift in emotion. They're okay, and there's a big improvement, no? Okay. Okay, so let me just end my discussion here and bring you and introduce you to my colleagues, Ivana and also Agnes, who's bringing us to another exercise. Yes, Ivana?
Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Josie, for that. Yeah, lots of information that could be helpful for us, no? So, okay, just a check-in with everyone. I hope you're all still with us. I hope you're still doing fine. Let's just take a few minutes of just pausing, and let's put our hand on our heart area, on our chest, and let's do some breathing exercise. Just 3 deep breaths, okay? Just to calm ourselves a little bit. It's been quite a very informative first hour. So let's just see how we can just calm ourselves down and take care of ourselves. So let's just breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, and breathe in, breathe out. Okay? I hope you're still with us. Ready for the next set of slides that we can learn from. Okay, next slide, please. So, back slide, please. Back slide, please. The slide before this. The slide before this, please. So, it is important to note that with all the information that's been given to us, shared by Jelly and Josie, what do we do next? How can we matter, or how can you matter as a support to your friend, to your loved one, to the people around you? How can you do that? It would be good to be aware of what are the small steps that we can do to make a difference. That is why you matter as a support. So next slide, please. Let's have a poll. Talking about suicide or asking someone if they feel suicidal will encourage suicide attempts. True or false? So talking about suicide or asking someone if they feel suicidal will encourage suicide attempts. And the answer is, are we getting answers? Okay. False. Okay, let's post the answer, please. Because you're right there, like Jessie was saying, I think you know already how to deal with someone who is having these kinds of issues. Because more often than not, talking opens communication. And sometimes fears shared to someone can likely diminish the fears. When they talk about their fears, that can likely be diminished, no? So, okay. So next slide, please. What is mental health first aid? A few years back, I had the chance of traveling to New Zealand. And this is one of the programs that the government encourages people as young as 18 years old and above to avail of. And their idea was that anybody, especially ages 18 and above, can provide mental health support to anyone who needs it. So, as mental health first responders, this is what we will be talking about in the next slides, what we can do to help how we can make a difference. Next slide, please. So think of the acronym ALGAE, where A stands for approach, assess, and assist a person in any crisis. That's your A. And L, listen non-judgmentally. G, give support and information. E, encourage appropriate professional help. And the next E, encourage self-help and other support strategies. So think of the acronym ALGAE when you feel that there is someone that you can help with any mental health issue as a mental health first responder. Okay? So next slide, please. So how do we approach? How do we assess? How do we assist? It's as simple as, next slide, please. Starting with, kamusta ka? Are you okay? Sometimes that opens a lot of doors for communication, for connecting. And with the virtual setup that we have right now, we can use a lot of this telegrams, I'm hearing, Viber, WhatsApp, messaging, Zoom sessions like what we're doing right now. There's always a way to connect with people that we think are going through some mental health issues. For example, there's someone, a friend or a loved one who you're constantly communicating with, and then you know that there's the possibility of him or her going through some mental health challenges. It would be good to check on them. So the "are you okay" opening statement can sometimes open a lot of doors to just keep the communication lines open. So next slide, please. Let's do another poll. Once a person is intent on suicide, there is no way of stopping them. True or false? Ella, do we have the answers? Wow, amazing. This is an amazing group. I don't think you need this webinar at all. So the answer is right, no? Because suicides can be prevented. People can be helped. And how can people be helped? Next slide, please. It takes someone who can listen without any judgment. That's our L, no? From the A, L, G, E, E, there's our L. Sometimes easy to say, but hard to do. How we can listen without any judgment. Next slide, please. Here are some tips of how we can listen with empathy. So be present and maintain eye contact at all times. Try to put away all distractions like looking at your watch or looking at your phone when you're talking to someone. Provide that safe space for the person who needs help, no? Use a calm voice and try to make the person feel that I am here for you. It's okay. I am here for you. Also try to control your urge to react the same way. Like if the person you're talking to or you're helping is already emotional, try not to be more emotional or as emotional. I know it might be difficult, but sometimes competing with them or making them feel guilty that you are as affected might not work well, no, in the situation. So try to get hold of your composure. It would also, I think, be helpful to reflect back, no. So what I heard you say is, because it may give that person the feeling that you're there for them, you're listening, you're hearing what they're saying. And it's also a good time to validate, no, to if there was something that was not so clear, because maybe they got overwhelmed with the emotions. Try to do away with the urge to say, and this is very common, especially with us Filipinos, the intention is always there. It's really good intention. But sometimes when you say something like, if I were you, in Tagalog, kung ako ikaw, because we don't really know what's happening, no? Instead, we can only give advice when there is already a safety issue that's involved, no? And safety issue will be something like, we know they're going to be in harm's way or they'll put somebody in harm's way. Next slide, please. Again, no? Refrain from giving your personal opinion unless it is asked explicitly. More often than not, we believe that the person we're trying to help, the person who is having some mental health challenges, have more or less an idea of how they're going to deal with the issue at hand. It's more on somebody being there for them and affirming them and validating them, no? So this is something that I think is also important for us to do, but sometimes not easy to be in this space. Do not judge the person on choosing the suicide ideation. What makes this important for us to think of? Because at the time that they're thinking already of the suicide ideation, there must be a lot of feelings that's going on, a lot of thoughts that are going in their mind. And the last thing they would want to hear is from you, is for you judging them for their choice of the action. Instead of that, it would be good to just listen and maybe understand. Listen to understand what's going on. Listen to understand where he's coming from, because we don't really know what's happening there. Validation is also a form of normalizing that it is a difficult state that they're in. No wonder they're thinking of suicide, maybe in this case, because of the overwhelming thoughts and feelings and circumstances that may be happening. And in this time of COVID, we hear a lot of that hopelessness that they may be feeling right now is something that can be too much for one person to bear, especially when there are already deaths in the family. Now, we were taught also that just suppose you do not know what to say. Sometimes silence can help you both, the person you're helping and yourself, to take this time to reflect on certain things. sometimes that 6-second rule and literally counting 6 seconds before you say something might be helpful. Even if it's difficult to be keeping quiet, use that time to pause, just like what we did a while ago, to pause and breathe. Because sometimes that will be, we can use that time to also clear our minds and help the person that we're talking to have a clearer perspective too, hopefully. So again, I'm going to have another poll, but this time, next slide, please. I'd like to invite my colleague, Ivana, who is a child psychologist, to talk about this. Ivana? Ivana? Okay. I'll just read the question. Young persons thinking about suicide cannot help themselves. True or false? Are we getting the answers? Okay. Ivana, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Ivana.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Agnes.
Yeah, so these are the responses. Okay, Ivana, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so 71% answered false, and 29% answered true. So young people can help themselves. Okay? Yeah, so it's false. So young people need guidance, need support from trusted adults, from emotionally regulated adults, and they can help themselves with that. So in counseling or coaching, we always say, we help the person help themselves. So at the end of the day, it is very important that the person is empowered or is able to find their own resources, their own meaning and outlook and value for life, but we help them find that. Okay, and it's their own personal meaning in life. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so finishing the acronym, letter G is give support and information. A lot of it is really validation, since even until now, there's so much stigma, even to the common mental health concerns, such as depression, such as anxiety, such that when we add certain stigma, it adds to the stress. For example, it's one thing for a person to feel anxious. It's one thing for one person to feel depressed, but it's another even more difficult thing when the person is scared of anxiety, is hating anxiety. It can be normal, but with a lot of pathologizing, with a lot of validating, with a lot of normalizing, we can have more clarity and understanding as to what we're really dealing on, and have and focus on that. Okay, so a lot of emotion education, again, providing the safe space for, especially for youth, which is actually vulnerable. Okay, so youth is one of the most vulnerable groups when it comes to mental health concerns. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here are the common questions we have in terms of how do we support other people. Okay, so Jelly explained the mental health continuum, right? There's self-care, social support, and professional support. So everyone has a role in terms of taking care of our personal mental health and the mental health of each other. Okay, it's a community work, and specifically social support plays a very important role. But because of how sometimes we're uncertain as to the nature of it, there can come questions of doubt, of uncertainty. So here are examples of the questions. What if I say the wrong thing and make the situation worse? I'm not qualified to deal with this. I don't want to interfere. It's a personal matter. It'll only get in the way. Maybe I'm overstepping. Won't they just get over it if I leave them? Okay. So one important thing that needs to be known, a person who is struggling with something, whether they show it or not, and especially teens, would appreciate help. It's just that they don't know how to ask for help. So seeing the availability of it, like seeing a person willing to listen to them, willing to hear them out, is already increasing the possibility of that person to receive help. So it's better than nothing at all, right? And in terms of when we talk about mental health concerns, we don't create the concern right there and then. We make space. We make space for the already existing concern, right? And especially if it's in the form of questions. Again, just hearing out what they need. How can I be here for you at this time? How may I help you at this time? Is there anything I can do? Okay, so that goes to show that you're very willing, that you're lending your presence, your empathy to the person, and that in itself is such a resource for a person. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, another true or false. The only effective intervention for suicide comes from professional psychotherapists with extensive experience in the area. Okay, let's spend a few seconds. Yeah, all right. So around 86% of you answered false, 80%. Yeah, that's right. So again, the mental health continuum, right? We can provide support in different levels. Again, it's a community responsibility. Even if there are different roles, each role is important. It's very important. Psychotherapy can help the person work through the concern, reframe cognitive biases, etc., etc. But it's also important, who are they with on a daily basis? Who they go home to? Who is their first line of defense, whether family or friends, right? So those all are very important, and each human being is so capable of providing validation, which is again so powerful, especially for someone who's very vulnerable mental health wise. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, letter E, encourage appropriate professional help. Okay, so again, each role is important and each role can be different. It's okay sometimes if you feel while you're trying your best to help, trying your best to feel emotionally regulated, trying your best to kind of validate and normalize, it can be overwhelming. And it's important that we don't take that against ourselves. It's part of our humanity. We have a limit, right? And it's okay if you're supporting someone to acknowledge, oh, this is beyond me. And that's okay. That's how it is at certain times. And that's why there are professionals. Okay? So it's very important in terms of your own personal boundaries. Also, hanggang saan ako pwede sumuporta? Hanggang saan? Hanggang gaano karami yung maibibigay ko? Because you're also advocating for your own personal health. So while you're taking care of the health of others, it's important to take care of one's own mental health. Even as counselors, we need to be mindful of that, because we are our own tool in terms of helping out each other. We are the greatest resource. So we need to take care of that resource such that we can continue to help and support more people. Okay. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So here are the benefits of consulting a mental health professional. I'd like to call on Agnes. Agnes, in your work with clients, what usually is the best feedback you get from them?
With seeking help with a mental health professional, aside from providing a safe space, I think what we find helpful is that that space can also be a place of non-judgment. So they will not necessarily feel that they will be judged for revealing their innermost feelings. So I think that's top of the line, no? That's the top of mind when people come in for professional help. They want somebody who also can be objective, no? To be objective. How about you? What have you experienced so far?
Yeah, exactly. Some of these people have, some haven't experienced a completely safe place just to be listened to
Mm-mm,
intentionally and fully with
mm-mm,
acceptance and respect that's very new for them. And in that kind of safe
mm-mm,
space, it enables a lot of things. It gives more clarity
mm-mm,
to their concern, it gives more understanding to their concern, and
mm-mm.
a lot of insights that can help them progress. Also,
Yeah, I
maybe,
like, yeah.
yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
what they
really,
also,
go ahead.
yeah, I think we're competing with another boy, with another sound system. But
Yeah, they're,
the thing is that thank you so much for that. Yeah, the thing is when they are given all of this, like you said, no, this information, it gives them, they come away feeling hopeful
mhm,
that things can get better, no?
mhm,
Especially when there's even the wellness checks that we are able to conduct with them, you know, taking care,
mhm,
making sure that they're having their follow-throughs with the doctor or follow-throughs with the counselor. So I
that's
think
right.
that gives them a feeling that they are taken care of. Somebody cares.
Mhm,
Somebody cares for them, to reach
mhm,
out to them when they need to be checked on. Yeah,
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. Just knowing that support is there, and important is they know there are things they can tap and also things they can do.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes they don't even
Mm.
realize their resources. Like, oh, I'm capable of regulating in this way. That when I do this, it helps me
Yeah.
out. So sometimes even just pointing out this works for you. This works for you.
Mm.
Maybe just doing
Yeah.
it more often, doing it in a different way, and expanding certain efforts to try to support oneself is already helpful in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're so right there, Ivana. So we like to go on with the next slide?
Yeah. Next slide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next slide, please. There. So this is the last letter already of our acronym ALGE.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was the last.
Another
Oh, that was
E.
the last. Okay. It's living a healthy lifestyle. Okay. So I would like to
Okay.
really highlight a very important concept that I feel is not as commonly known in mental health. It's mental hygiene,
Mm.
right? So what we
Yeah.
do usually know is physical hygiene, and everyone knows that, right, Agnes? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Like
do
how
we
we
do
take
for
care
our
of ourselves
physical
physically.
hygiene? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like taking a bath,
Mm.
like brushing our teeth. So we do, what's the nature of that? One, we do it out of routine. We do it regularly. We don't do it when our health is already compromised. We do it for maintenance of our physical health. So there are parallels for mental hygiene. When you talk to someone, when you unwind for the
Mm.
day, when you do something you like, that's all mental hygiene. Yeah. And really prevention and
Mm.
maintenance is more effective than intervention. Intervention is always there, but there's so many things we can do even before that, right? So what is
Mm-mm.
under here? There's exercise, there's connecting time with people, there's downtime.
Mm.
We can be very busy and very engaged in a lot of things, and a lot of energy and information can be overwhelming. Even just taking a step back
Mm-hmm.
to find a moment of
Mm-hmm.
rest can be a mental hygiene habit, right? Like
Mm.
downtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of
Mm-mm.
things. Yeah, one very simple mental hygiene habit that I really find um, effective for clients is just the breathing exercise. Okay,
Yeah.
so when we're stressed, it manifests in a lot of ways: emotions, thoughts, and body. So the body experiences it. So how to regulate the physiological response of stress is to regulate the breathing. So the breathing when we're calm is breathing in for 5 counts, 3, 4, 5, then out 7 counts. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's longer out breath than in breath. And if you do that repeatedly until you later find out your heartbeat is going to slow down, starting to calm down, and you also feel gradually calm. Yeah, there are other ways, but this is just one of the basic ones that I feel can help in moments of stress and when you feel overwhelmed. Right? Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Ivana. Thank you, Ivana. So
Back
yeah,
to you,
I like that
Agnes.
breathing exercise, no? That breathing exercise can really be helpful, no? Simple
Yes.
breathing exercise, like you're saying, Ivana. Okay, maybe we can try that later on, no? When we get when we get back to our work from home, or we are at home pala. We are all at home. So that's okay when we're away from this webinar. So next slide, please. So how do we help someone when someone we know is having thoughts of suicide? It would be good to stay calm. Thank them for the courage to tell you, to share with you their thoughts. Thank you for trusting me with that information. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with me. And then ask, how do you want me to help you? It would be good to know what is expected of us, rather than you rush into a suggestion that might not be helpful at all. No, try to ask what they expect from you in terms of the help that they need. No, reassure them that you are going to help them the best way that you can, that you are there for them. And like Ivana was mentioning a while ago, you know, there are people who are trained to help people who are having suicidal thoughts. We are the first responders. We are the ones who can refer them to a mental health professional after we've done our ALGEE. So it's really, we don't have to carry the burden by ourselves. There are people who can help the people we're helping, who can help them in the best way, that better than us. So it would be good for us to also know, hanggang dito lang yung kaya ko. Sabi nga ni Ivana, our boundaries are up to here, no? So ask permission when you do that. May I refer you to a mental health professional? Do you want me to connect them with you, or you with them? I can call them now. So all the help that you can provide, the best way that you can, is already good enough for that time, no? Now, reduce immediate stressors and remove sick and secure lethal means in your homes. I would go as specific as knives, ropes, chemicals, drugs. Make sure that the home is a safe place. Or if you cannot do that by yourselves because of this social distancing, you can connect with the emergency contact number, the emergency contact person. And normally that could be a relative or somebody who is close to them, who is with them in their home. Okay? So here are some of the tips, no? So next slide, please. It would be good to remember that suicide is preventable. As first responders, as mental health first responders, we can be very much help a person who is going through these suicide thoughts. We talked about the signs a while ago with Jelly and Josie. We can reach out. We can show support. We can do that because we are the ones there. We are the ones immediately there who can show that kind of help that they need at that particular time. Next slide, please. It is also important to remember to trust your gut, and assume that you are the only one who is going to reach out. More often than not, sometimes because maybe of fear or uncertainty, we say, that's not my problem. Somebody else will help that person. But assume because of our willingness to help, we trust our gut when we are faced with the situation of helping someone. Just go for it. Extend that help. Because, next slide, please. Compassion is the key. Compassion can make a difference. Never forget that. Next slide, please. Talking about mental health saves lives. All it takes is one caring, compassionate person to take notice and start the conversation. And that person is you. So will you follow my hand movements? Let's all do this. That's why you matter. Shall we do this again? That's why you matter. Thank you. And let's move on now to Dr. Julian.
Hello, thank you. Wow, thank you very much. Thank you, Jelly. There you are. Thank you very much. Thank you again. Thank you, Jelly, Doc Josie, Agnes, and Ivana. And thank you so much to all our participants. So let us remember always that we all matter in saving lives. So shall we go into then some connect with some resources? As I told you, we will be leaving you with very important resources so that you can be supported and you can support also your loved ones. So can we move a slide down? There, these are very important numbers that you can call. This is our crisis line, and they are free and anonymous 24/7 crisis line hotlines that you can call. There are mental health responders who have been trained to support people in crisis, and for sure people who are thinking of hurting themselves may benefit from this call here. And so please take note of these numbers, and you can call them and you can also give it to your loved ones, to your friends, for those who are in need. Okay, so this is a crisis line. It's a hotline for crisis situations. Next slide, please. Then this one here, if you visit our website here, this one here of intouch.org, if you visit that, there will this coping during COVID will pop up, and it is a special section that we've developed right after we started with lockdown. we went on this idea, and we worked, and there are a lot of information here, a lot of materials, a lot of exercises, also videos that can lead you. These are exercises that you can follow, that can calm you down, that can give you mental skills, that will be make you more resilient, can be more effective in managing your crisis, and even lessen your crisis. So there are sections for parents and kids, there are for couples, for workplace, for community responders, and general well-being. So you click that, and there'll be a lot of material there, help for you. And then we also have Let's Talk Mental Health. The idea here is that I interviewed a lot of counselors with different specializations. And so I asked them, for example, I have a kid and he is irritable, how can I help the kid to stop? I have a school age child who is now into the gadgets and everything, and he's staying there, he's bored. How can I? And also other people, other counselors who are specialized in grief and loss. I ask them questions on how to help people who are in grief and loss. And so these ones here, these are about 4 minute recordings of their answers. So again, visit our website, and there'll be a lot of information there for you. Okay, and then we have also, next slide, please. Yeah, and these ones here, we have a lot of numbers here. Remember we had our crisis line number of In Touch, but there are also other very important numbers that we can call for help. The Philippine National Police, the Red Cross, and a lot of hotlines, free counseling hotlines. Hopeline. There's the Philippine Mental Health Association. And so this one here will all be posted in our Facebook. So please, if you weren't able to catch them, screenshot them, it will be posted there. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. So now let's go into our Q&A. All right. So here we have a number of questions from our viewers. So I will just ask the question, and then I will ask our speakers to turn on their mics and their videos, so then they can be ready to answer our questions. So the first question, how do I know if he or she is talking about suicide just to get attention? Okay, how do I know if he or she is talking about suicide just to get attention?
Yeah, can I start with that, or you wanted to start?
Sure.
Kelly? Yeah.
Go ahead, Ivana. You can start.
Sige,
Okay,
Ivana.
I'll start first. So one of the key messages that are salient in the talk is one, we validate, and we don't, other than not judging, we also don't assume any bias or any malice in it. So in thinking that the person is doing it out of attention, we can also manage that first, validating what he or she is expressing, and whether or not it is for attention. Okay, it's better to first see what is it about, rather than drawing a conclusion right away. Okay, yeah, that's one. And Jelly, you wanted to add?
Yes, I would agree with you, Ivana, that we don't know actually until we hear more from the person. So like what Agnes said with approach and asking, are you okay? It's actually better to take it seriously, because we'll only find out later. And I like what you said, we we should not prejudge or have a bias if we think it's only a call for attention. So we take any signal or any hint of wanting to harm themselves or take their life seriously. So yeah, better to approach, better to listen, and then give resources and how to help them.
Okay. Thank you, Jel, Ivana. Connected to that, there is a question here in Tagalog. Paano po tumulong sa depressed o suicidal na tao without giving advice? Kung 30 minutes ko na siya kausap o isang oras, makikinig lang ba ako? So, di ba, parang paano ko siya matutulungan?
Yeah.
Hindi ako kailangan magbigay ng advice. Pero andun ako, tagal ko na sa kanya, ganyan, pero makikinig lang ba ako?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and maybe Agnes can add also to that, because we also train the crisis line responders on how to respond to calls like this. Definitely makikinig, and then we validate, meaning when we listen to them, pakikinggan natin na they have a good reason to be thinking this way dahil sobrang depressed sila, o mabigat talaga yung dinadala nila na burden. Kaya nila naiisip, di ba, Agnes, na maigi na lang magpakamatay, or huwag na lang mabuhay, huwag na lang magising. So, unang-una, we validate that. And sometimes that already eases the burden that the person is carrying, kasi somebody can begin to understand the burden that they have. But of course, at the end, if we really don't feel, mahirap magbigay ng advice, but at least we can give them the information na dahil mabigat ka yan, baka if we feel we're not the best person to help them, magbigay tayo ng information na baka pwedeng tumawag ka dito sa crisis line. O sa InTouch, may mga counselors doon na talagang makakatulong sa'yo. And kasi we can also listen for advice. We can also listen so that we can give better advice pag alam natin in a solution-focused way na parang, sa tingin mo, paano ako makakatulong sa'yo? We could ask the person that, di ba, what is, do you need advice, or you just need me to accompany you, or you just need me to, be with you tonight hanggang malampasan mo to, or like this, or help you to talk to your family, di ba, your parents, or your other people who can help you. So we can also ask them that. So yeah, what can you add, Agnes? I think you might.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, thank you, Jelly. And tama naman, no? Tama naman. Minsan, magandang tanungin. Yung expectations nung taong tinutulungan mo. Ano ba yung tulong na ibibigay ko sa iyo ngayon? What do you expect from me? How can I help you? Minsan, yung nga sinasabi natin, minsan, alam naman nila kung anong kailangan nila. Kailangan lang nilang may taong makikinig sa kanila. So sabi niyo nga po, dun sa nagtanong nito, 30 minutes yun ang kausap, minsan ang pakikinig at ang being there could be good enough, no? Pero yung sort of a gentle advice na sinasabi natin, yung sinasabi ni Jelly, you're leading them now to some sort of information that they can act on. Like for example, kagaya niyan, sasabihin mo na, alam mo kung talagang gusto mong may kausap na makakapagpapaliwanag sa'yo, baka kailangan na natin kumausap ng somebody who can really help, no? Maaring counselor, maaring doktor. Pero ang importante na gusto nating i-emphasize dun sa kausap natin na tinutulungan natin, there is help. May laging tutulong. Meron at merong tutulong. There is always help. Either ikaw na tutulong, either a professional na tutulong, kamag-anak na tutulong, kaibigan na tutulong, meron at merong tutulong kung gusto nilang mangyari yun, kung papayagan nila. I hope that helps.
Mm.
Thank you.
Oo.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. May iba naman tayong ano, there's this question here. Just curious, how to encourage someone to call crisis line or other helplines? Are there keywords to mention that will make them think to act on helping themselves? Interesting question.
Well, ang importante dyan is it's anonymous, it's confidential. Kasi over the phone you don't even have to give your real name, no? Kung medyo nahihiya
Mhm.
sila.
Tama.
Ito yung crisis line covers naman lahat ng posibleng mental health and emotional issues. So hindi lang tong suicide calls, pati relationship, pati school problem, work problem, so we cover they're trained to cover the whole range, itong bereavement or stress management. Pero handa din sila for domestic violence and itong suicide callers. Pero siguro yung subukan mo lang. Di ba, di ba Agnes, ganun, we say that in the training, ano? Because Agnes and I also do the crisis line training. We can encourage, if you're their friend and then you want them to call the crisis line, pwede, subukan natin. Like, kung gusto mo, akong tatawag, tapos pag na-connect na, check natin na legit ito, di ba? Na talagang may sasagot. Tapos, inayaan na kita. Yung parang, ikaw nang tumuloy doon sa call, but you can even, help your friend make the call.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Jelly. And one thing to encourage also them to call crisis line, meron ho kaming Facebook account.
Yeah.
Pwede niyo mong basahin doon yung mga comments po ng mga taong natulungan na namin. Para makita niyo rin po paano nakatulong sa pagtawag sa crisis line. And free, anonymous, telephone counseling, hindi niyo ho kailangan sabihin yung pangalan ninyo kung hindi kayo comfortable, kung hindi pa kayo, hindi pa niyo kilala, ayaw niyo pang sabihin ang totoo. Hindi naman ho namin tatanungin eh. We just need some to call you by something, by a name. You can always say, ito pangalan ko. Pero ang importante po, more often than not, ang gusto lang po namin, pag tumawag kayo sa crisis line, ang best hope po namin na you feel helped. Na magkakaroon ho kayo ng hope na meron hong nakikinig sa inyo. May nakikinig sa inyo na hindi ho bias. We try to be objective as possible. And at the same time, kami po ay handang tumulong 24/7, 365 days a year. Nandyan po kami. Wala ho kaming bakasyon, wala ho kaming holidays. Every time you call, somebody will answer you. Totoo pong tao, hindi po recording o robot.
Hindi robot.
Hindi robot. So sana ho nakatulong po 'yon sa inyong sa inyong tanong.
Yeah.
Okay. So, connected dyan sa walang bakasyon ang mga nagre-respond dyan. Meron isang question dito kasi we have also in our last statistics, we had about itong sa ating mga registrations, 35 to 40% ay mga counselors ang nakikinig sa atin. Siguro mas marami pa dyan. So may question dito. How do mental health professionals cope with stress after they help multiple people in distress? I mean, even if they're professionals, they still feel the heaviness of other people's problems. Di ba? So, how do mental health professionals cope with the stress after they help multiple people in distress?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Julian. I was thinking we really have to emphasize that kasi ma-absorb din natin yan or we might even, di ba, yung the vicarious trauma, di ba, na ma-absorb natin yung stress nila, So, kami ni Agnes, we use a modality that's called solution focus. So that's one way na we can move from talking about the problem to finding solutions. So when we got trained in that, like 10 years ago, mas nakakagaan ng sessions. Pero in addition to that, syempre we are human, so of course we also get affected. we support each other then. I call Agnes, I call Ivana, like that, diba? So we also have a support group where we debrief. Dr. Julian's our supervisor, so we have these mechanisms where we can also offload with other counselors or supportive colleagues. So isa yan. Tsaka yung all like kanina yung mental health hygiene Ivana mentioned, and also all the self-care strategies that we tell our clients. Gawin din natin yun. I mean, we have to also be active in doing that. If I may share, like 2 or 3 months ago, I was telling Dr. Julian, I'm feeling in a low mood. I would say I was depressed because of the long quarantine. And so since then, naging mas conscious ako about my morning routine. Definitely keeping the exercise in the morning, the prayer time, a little inspirational reading before breakfast, reaching out to my trusted colleagues and friends. So I became more conscious of that. Tsaka Agnes, di ba nagpapagpag din tayo? Sometimes we have to do little rituals to make pagpag at the end.
Literally pagpag. Literally pagpag.
Shower. Diba? Sometimes you take a shower.
Yeah.
Or literally yung mga movements from yoga or this qigong where you brush off the negative energy, or yung mga ganun, or you write it out and throw it away. There are a lot of this journaling. You find what helps you.
Siguro idadagdag ko lang din,
Sige,
Jerry.
Josie, anong i-add?
Yeah.
Sorry, Josie. Yeah.
Tapos na? Okay. Idadagdag ko lang na
No.
kailangan
No, it's
makinig ka.
okay, Jenny.
Tapos na?
Go ahead.
Ang dadagdag ko lang, so sana dapat makinig din tayo sa sarili natin, no? Kasi hindi pwedeng kopya-kopya lang. We copy what others are doing. Kasi people have different ways. Kung medyo introvert ka, mapapansin mo importante sa'yo ang manahimik. Okay? Kung medyo extrovert ka, gusto mo may iba kang nakikita, ibang activity, or nakikipag-usap ka, no? So I think pakinggan mo rin kung ano yung kailangan mo at the moment kasi pwedeng magbago-bago siya. Yeah. And I just also like to say, no, sa akin kasi ako introvert, alam mo nakakatulong sa akin yung mindfulness breathing, no? Yung mananahimik, yung kasi minsan magulo ang isip. Ang kailangan ko lang may ibang pagtutuunan ng aking attention tulad ng aking paghinga, tulad ng mga ang tawag nito, no, pwedeng sound sa paligid ko lang, or maybe yung iyong yung yoga movement o yung movement ng katawan, no? Or alam mo ba, pwede ka rin yung manahimik lang, yung dahan-dahan kang kumakain, o isang form yan. Pag introvert ka, okay? Pag extrovert, like I think was Jelly mentioned earlier, maraming ways.
Yeah. Thank you, Josie. Can I also add?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Josh. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I learned this framework from Josie, actually. It's called the Healthy Mind Platter. So with the mental hygiene habits, in order to expand what else we can do, an importance of it is actually that we make each time distinct. Like you have focus time, you have downtime, you have personal time. And true for not just counselors, but people working at home now, which is mostly everyone, it's hard to make distinct work life from home life. Before, we had very explicit cues. When I'm at work, okay, I'm working. When it's lunch break, I'm with my colleagues. I can eat, I can take a break. When I'm home, okay, no more work, I rest. But now we don't have those cues. So how do we set up explicitly with intentionality those cues such that it's clear for us, there's clarity. Okay, right now I'm working. Just working. Or after, okay, right now I'm just enjoying my coffee. Downtime, I don't have to think of my clients. I don't have to think about work. This is me time. So it's setting up those boundaries, which can be difficult with just, we're all in just one space, and it can feel just sometimes at one point, day to day, just client, or work. How do you identify what are parts of your, what are aspects of your life that you want to maintain? And how do you make that distinct? And how do you protect the boundaries of each one? So the clarity and intentionality for each one would help. And the balance of that, again, the healthy mind platter by who was that again? Josie?
Daniel Siegel,
Yes.
the author of Brainstorm. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good balance, because when there's a balance of those things under the healthy mind platter, the brain is at its optimal functioning. We can focus well, we can regulate thoughts well, we can decide easily. So it has multiple benefits. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So parang alam niyo na yung mga sumusunod na questions eh. We have our last two questions here now.
Okay.
So this one here, just a fast question. What is the relationship of good sleep and mental health?
Ay,
Ay,
so
naku.
important.
Oh,
Go
okay,
ahead,
okay.
Josie.
Okay, yes, that's my favorite subject, no?
You have half an
Actually,
hour.
okay, hindi naman. Parang ganito lang, no? Alam mo ano, mapapansin nyo, karamihan ng mga mental health conditions, okay? Ang common denominator, meron silang kulang sa tulog, no? So yung una, irregular sleeping, o tapos pagising-gising, tapos nagiging poor yung quality ng sleep, no? So I think what you want is you need to get adequate amount of sleep to be able to function the following day, because the brain, okay, the brain depends also on the sleep, no? So if you don't give your brain the adequate rest it needs, then chances are you get emotional, okay, hirap kang makafocus, mahirap to learn new things, okay, and then at the same time it affects your functioning the following day. So ito lang, kasi nagiging practice karamihan sa atin, ginagamit natin ang social media pampatulog. Make sure you don't, because mapapansin nyo, the moment kunwari pagod na yung eyes and you decide na you want to retire, biglang hindi ka makatulog, no? Your mind is awake, you keep on toss and turning for an hour or two, because the technology, or that blue rays emitted by the technology makes it creates more brain activity. So in fact, what is recommended in the researches now, okay, to have quality sleep, okay, make sure you get away from the social media, or get off the grid. I would always say get off the grid an hour or an hour and a half, yung time that you decide to sleep. Okay? Yun lang.
Thank you, Josie. So I have my last question. But before I say my last question, I'd like to thank all those who have sent questions here. We have a lot, and we have not answered many also. So we will try to answer this, and we've set up a system to be able to get back to you, and we will be able to answer these questions. So now, my last question. There is this person here who would like to hear from each one of you, the speakers, to give one takeaway from each one of you, that you would want to tell all the participants. Just one short giveaway to all participants.
Okay.
So shall we start with Jelly?
Yeah. I like this quote from Stephen Hawking, that we fear everything, and he's in a wheelchair, but he's still able to make contribution to life. So important contributions to the world, and also he says, while there's life, while there's hope, there's life. So what we're doing here, why you matter, each one of us is important to give each other hope, so that we can continue living.
Thank you, Jelly.
Mhm.
Okay. Josie, Doc
Okay.
Josie.
Awareness, okay, is key in preventing, okay, these conditions, no? So you need to recognize, okay, when you're not sleeping, or you're becoming emotional, or you're overthinking. So I think it's good to to talk to someone. And I would always say counseling is an opportunity to think aloud with someone.
Thank you, Josie. And Agnes?
Yeah, I would say that it does not matter if you have the credentials of a mental health provider. It does not matter whether you are a a young person and an old person, for as long as you have the compassion and the willingness to help someone, it starts there. You are the first line of defense. As first responders, we can make the difference.
Thank you. And our youngest, the young generation, will speak out now.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so for me, one is these are very unique period. This is a very unique period of time, and it's natural sometimes to feel overwhelmed, to feel lost, or to feel uncertain. What helps, I've noticed, clients ground themselves, and also personally, and the people around me to ground themselves, is to go back to your own humanity, right? When you feel overwhelmed or whatnot, self-compassion really helps. Being kind and patient and understanding with yourself. Okay. And aside from that, even in terms of helping other people, sometimes it can get overwhelming. Like, what's the safety protocol? Who is the support system? Whatnot. Again, humanize the person. Don't see the symptoms. Hold off first. Yes, it's important to know the symptoms, behaviors, the support, but see them as a person. Okay. And be there for them also as a person. They need human connection, they need validation, they need compassion. And that's what really saves life, the humanity of it. And self compassion, I would recommend that as a good resource for shared humanity, because shared humanity is one aspect of self compassion. One resource that I like looking up is Dr. Kristen Neff on self compassion. That can be very calming and grounding in difficult and overwhelming times.
Thank you, Ivana. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you to each one of you. Jelly, Doc Josie, Agnes, and Ivana. Thank you. And also thank you so much for all our participants.
Mm-mm.
No, so we all remember now that we all matter in saving lives. So before we end, I would just like to make a very important announcement that as we are celebrating our 40th founding anniversary, on October 10, we will have another webinar. So please join us there again, October 10. And this would also be the day of World Mental Health Day. Okay, so I'll
And
see you again.
the
Yeah,
topic,
Jen,
Dr. Julian, for October 10 is
surprise.
fortifying mental health.
Fortifying mental health. Okay. I think that will come out now with our
Yeah.
slide now, the next slide. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm supposed to also give you instructions for our feedback. Here, we can watch this for a while. Do you want to see that? There. Thank you. So, so there. I think, do I have to give instructions for feedback forms? Because you will be giving your, for those who want to get their certificates, you will have to complete that feedback form that we will be giving out the here we have a link that has been placed in the Zoom. So if you can just click on that and you can answer the webinar feedback, and then also inform us that you want your certificate. Okay, so see you all October 10, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for this wonderful evening, and thank you all and have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Stay safe.